If you're an entrepreneur or an investor and you have the ability to live anywhere, Asia may offer you the lifestyle and low tax regime that you're looking for. Today, I'm going to run you through a number of the residence permits that you can get just to give you a taste of where you might want to start your search. Asia has always been popular for expats. You've got in many parts of the continent great weather. You've got great taxes. You can pay as little as zero as an entrepreneur or investor if you're structured properly. You've got nice people in many parts of the continent. Citizenship is not something that you're generally going to work towards, but if you've got that covered somewhere else, then it can be a great place to live. And so today I wanted to give you a taste, just a little bit of a taste on the programs. Leave a comment below which country you'd like to hear more about, and we can dive into that specifically. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best, from lowering your taxes to diversifying and protecting your assets to finding freedom in an unfree world with things like second passports. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com, and you can join us at Nomad Capitalist Live, our annual event that's open to everyone. So when we look at Asia, I think a lot of folks think Southeast Asia because you see so much media talk about digital nomads in Bali and people moving to Bangkok. And so Southeast Asia is a great place for the weather and for the taxes. But let's start in the north, just to give you a taste of some lesser talked about places. We can assume you don't want to live in North Korea, but let's talk about South Korea. What many people don't know is they've got what's effectively a golden visa program. With the Korean won retreating against the US dollar and other major currencies, as have most Asian currencies recently, you can get a deal. It's now as little as about $400,000, even a little bit less, to make an investment. You have certain real estate options, not everywhere in the country, but you've got certain places, including Jeju Island to the south. People might find it to be a more interesting lifestyle than living in a place like Seoul. Seoul's a great city, but if you want that island lifestyle and you want to actually own your own land, Korea gives you the ability to do that. Anyone can go to Jeju Island, and so if you invest in property there, you can get it. There's other ways you can invest in businesses, you can invest in certain Korean government debt, you can buy property, and it starts at $400,000 for the most palatable investment options. You can theoretically work towards citizenship in South Korea. You're going to have to give up your other citizenships only under very limited circumstances. Do not have to do that, but you'll need to learn Korean, and you actually need to go and learn it. So it's very formal, as you would find in North Asia. Japan is more difficult. We've had folks who've lived in Japan that we've worked with, and what they generally do is live there on a tourist visa. And so you've seen people who want to renounce U.S. citizenship, for example. They no longer have 90 days to go in. None of the Caribbean passports give you access. The one passport we've seen people get, unless they're entitled to citizenship by descent, is Turkey through the Citizenship by Investment program. And they can go in and out of Japan. Japan is now reopening, so certainly if you were living in Japan as a tourist for the last couple of years, you would have had trouble getting back in. But the challenge with Japan is the tax regime. They have a state tax, they have income tax provisions. If you've lived there too long, it is nasty. And so what Japan looks at, and I'm giving you a very simplistic version, not tax advice, is are you a permanent resident? Are you a resident, or are you just a tourist? And so generally speaking, just coming in as a tourist has been the way to live in Japan. It's really not that sophisticated, and so there's a way to live there. It's only for folks who just really want to live in Japan. And that's the simplified version. Japan is a more difficult country to get into, but South Korea, among the northern Asian countries, definitely a lot easier. Taiwan, obviously, people have some concerns now. They've had programs historically. We can invest about $1 million. And so a more expensive version of being able to live in Taiwan as an investor. I think probably the best tax regime, South Korea is somewhat moderately taxed, and they do have some limited offerings for foreigners on that front. But Southeast Asia, being that many of its countries have territorial tax systems, now you have Indonesia rolling out a digital nomad visa with a baked-in tax exemption, are probably where most people want to go, because most people that I'm talking to are looking for warm weather. You occasionally find someone who wants to live in Ireland, wants to live in Northern Europe, wants to live in a place like South Korea with a more temperate climate. But for folks who want tropical, want low tax, want easier immigration options at a lower price point, Southeast Asia is where it's at. Vietnam is a bit more difficult. Again, people are often living there on tourist visas. If you start a business in Vietnam, you can get in, and we had someone who did that. Do you want to start a business in Vietnam? Certainly, I would say that should be part of a global structure. You probably shouldn't base your entire business in Vietnam. But if you're doing something that's manufacturing based, if you're doing something where you'd want to work in Vietnam, we have had folks who've enjoyed hiring in Vietnam. It's a very affordable place to hire. I think it's probably some of the most skilled labor force in the region. But unless you're really going to formalize that structure, it's probably a place that I wouldn't go to now. Obviously, you can also cross off places like Myanmar. And oh, by the way, in Northern Europe, Mongolia had a program for residents, $100,000 and up. Really difficult, I think, to get towards citizenship, and probably not a place a lot of folks want to live. But interesting place if you want to look at the resources environment. Anyway, back to Southeast Asia. The places that I think are the most interesting. Cambodia is not as formal, but if you're doing some kind of business there, historically they've just given out what's called an e-visa or a business visa to people who just show up and pay the fee. It's becoming a bit more difficult now. You may want to have some indication of doing business or some thing that you're doing, or have some kind of referral, but you can live in Cambodia, and it's not really a full residence permit, but that was possible. They're now rolling out the CM2H program. If you put $100,000 into approved real estate, which seems like a very short list right now, and perhaps a very expensive real estate investment option, you can get residence, and we're still waiting on details of how that could lead to citizenship in as little as 5 years. If you happen to be a Cambodian citizen, that would be a very rare way of getting access into the ASEAN region, and then you could go to all the other countries as a tourist with that Cambodian passport, as well as have the opportunity to buy land. Because outside of Malaysia and Korea and Japan, most countries in Asia don't allow foreigners to buy land. Thailand, next door, is opening up a number of different residence permit options, including one that if you invest over $1 million would allow you to buy land. Thailand has the Thai Elite Visa. You're basically paying a fee for access 5, 10, or 20 years. Better for single people, better if you're just planning on staying for 5 years or so, and you're not thinking 20 years in the future. Not as good as a long-term backup plan. Investor Visa, they're rolling out a new 10-year residence permit as well. So you've got 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, and even 20-year options in Thailand. The ones that work, especially if you've got a family and especially if you just don't want to live there, would be not paying a fee through the Thai Elite Visa, but one of the longer term investment options where you're putting mid-six figures into government bonds, into real estate. There are restrictions on that, not only that you can't own the land in most cases, unless now you're investing big amounts of money, but also that you generally need to buy property from certain people, like a developer. You could also put the money in the bank in some cases. And so if you want to open a bank account, Thailand could be a good option. I'm all for having residence permits where you can simply make a passive investment. Bank accounts as passive as it gets. You're not getting a lot of money in interest. Maybe it's a little bit more than where you live. Maybe you're getting exposure to a currency like the Thai baht that's gotten beaten up. But hey, if you want to find a place to park some money, banks, bonds, obviously very easy. You can just keep that residence permit in your back pocket for a number of years. So that's what Thailand offers. They're rolling out lots of new residence permits. And if you're a worker who makes $80,000 or more in a big company, they're going to allow you to come in using that as well without starting a company, just coming in on a long-term basis, not a digital nomad visa. Malaysia offers the My Second Home program, both on the mainland, and also there's a Sarawak MM2H program, which is a little bit more flexible if you're willing to pop into Sarawak, which is on Borneo. Malaysia has two parts, Peninsular Malaysia, where Kuala Lumpur and Penang are, as well as the lesser developed Sabah and Sarawak on Borneo, which it shares with Brunei and Indonesia. Brunei, difficult country to get into for most folks, certainly for entrepreneurs and investors in most cases, zero tax, but not a place that people ask about very much. So Malaysia has the MM2H program. You're talking about 1 million ringgit, so 225,000 US dollars or so, tied up in a bank account for as long as you want to go there. You're going to get a long-term residence permit. It's going to be more affordable and easier conditions in Sarawak. But again, do you want to go and spend time in Sarawak? They have now rolled out a new 90-day minimum stay for the mainland MM2H program, so it's changed into a program for someone who really wants to live there, because you also need to show about $9,000 per month in income. If you start a company in Labuan, it's Malaysia's tax haven. They used to have different options to reduce your taxes. Now it's basically a flat 3%. And so if you want to pay 3%, and that's worth the price of admission to not make an investment, to not put money in the bank, then you can use that as a pathway to living in Malaysia if you're willing to hire someone. There are other programs as well if you have talent, if you're bringing in certain types of business interests. But I think for most high-level entrepreneurs and investors, either move the company there, which comes with its own planning considerations, or simply put the money in the bank and commit to the time. In Singapore, a country folks ask about, number one, are you prepared to spend the majority of your time in Singapore? Long term, if you don't do that, I think it's not really that good of an option. And so if you want to start a company, you're going to have to prove you've got a good company, and bringing your family may be challenging or may take a while. And so if you want to start a company, you're going to be paying tax on that company. Rates in Singapore are fair, they're reasonable. It's got a pretty friendly tax structure, but it's not zero. And there are some things that you need to do. You have to file audits. You've got to keep up with the company. I mean, there are expenses to running a Singapore company. It is not as lightweight as many of the tax havens, right? And so in where you'd start your company in the UAE and get a residence permit, there's not much to do in the free zones. Singapore is not going to be that easy. If you have lots of money, if you are in the 9 figures, if you have substantial management experience, if you've run a really big company, if you can invest a couple $1 million, then you can get into Singapore using their global investor program. But that is a program that, again, is going to, in the long run, require a time commitment. It is a permanent residence program, which comes with its own lifestyle considerations. And I think citizenship in Singapore is very difficult. Historically, it's been possible, and some people were willing to be singular citizens of Singapore, but I think that's going to be something that is not doable. And so Singapore is relatively tax-friendly, but if you're moving there only for the taxes, the relatively high cost of getting set up probably turn a lot of people off. I think you could go to parts of Malaysia, parts of Thailand, and spend a lot less money on housing, spend a lot less on everything. In Malaysia, you can actually own a house on land, and so that appeals to a lot of folks, especially from the US. Probably a better deal for the average person. By the way, we've worked with folks who have a couple $100 million, and even they've said, this Singapore seems like too much hassle for what it's worth. So unless you really want to live there and really want to commit and really want to put it in your business or your money, that's going to be difficult. In the Philippines, they have some options, mid-5-figure investment. Some of the options have been shut down for the last couple of years, but there's still an option to get in there. Territorial tax system, obviously there's been some lifestyle issues over the past couple of years where I think fewer people are looking at the Philippines, but there are still some options. Indonesia, there's been numerous different ways to get into Indonesia over the years. The challenge was it was never that tax friendly. Indonesia flirted with territorializing its tax system, did not do that, but now they're rolling out a digital nomad visa. So in Asia, where you're not going to work towards citizenship generally anyway, a digital nomad visa may be more appealing. There are some countries where I would think that a simple digital nomad visa may not really be viewed as a substantial enough residence to allow you to claim residence somewhere else. But I think if you're actually spending time in Indonesia, that could work. And so what they're saying is with this new 5-year digital nomad visa, there will be no tax obligations. They're still putting some of the pieces in place. But this could be the first opportunity for folks in a country where having a KITAS, for example, often meant tax challenges. Now a digital nomad visa could be a way to do this. So Indonesia's always been kind of challenging for folks who wanted to avoid taxes. And there's been people who said, they don't really care about expats. Well, that hasn't really been the truth. They just haven't found them yet. So a visa with 5 years with a baked-in tax incentive could be an option. So that gives you an idea of the options for living in Asia and what we would typically talk about Asia. Obviously, if you go to the Middle East, you've got the UAE, start a company, or buy real estate. You've got Bahrain with a couple different options to buy real estate now. The level in Bahrain is a little bit lower than the UAE. And so those are probably 2 of the ones that stand out. Saudi Arabia will sell you a permanent residence permit for $213,000 for the rest of your life. And so those are also options in Asia as well. So lots of options to choose from. Asia has a lot of tax-friendly choices. And I think Asia historically favors wealth, favors you bringing you wealth, favors you showing that you can maintain an income, that you can maintain your wealth. And so if you're willing to do that, then you have great lifestyle, great tax advantages, great people. That's a sampling. Leave a comment below and tell me what you want to hear more about in Asia.